arguments are viewed as so controversial within the LGBTQ communities, some trans activists will not even come on the line to speak with me and Jenn. One such activist, Morgan Auger, refuses to speak directly to Jenn Smith. Others have protested Jenn Smith's speaking engagement at the University of British Columbia. And here is the issue. Jenn Smith is now filing a human rights complaint against Facebook because Facebook has effectively barred him, banned him from their platform. Jenn Smith is filing a human rights complaint because he says, look, you may not agree with my viewpoints, but I should not be censored. And that will be the basis of his complaint. We'll get Jenn Smith to discuss this with us momentarily. We've got Jenn. Are you on the line?
Hi, I'm here.
Thank you so much, Jenn. As I mentioned earlier, you are viewed as controversial within the LGBT communities because of your viewpoints, because you oppose gender identity to be taught in schools. You oppose children being encouraged to transition into the opposite gender, especially at a young age. And when you have your speaking engagements, you are heavily protested. Now you are filing a human rights complaint against Facebook for banning you from their platform. Tell us about why you're filing this complaint, what you think will come out of it.
Okay, well, I think it's important to get some context. So you've sort of laid out some of the problems that I'm having in society generally, not just with Facebook, being able to communicate my views, which, as you say, are controversial. And I would say that the reaction that you're seeing to me in society generally from my opponents is because I have very effective arguments and they don't want those arguments getting out to the public, because people might stop and say, well, wait a second here. You know, there are legitimate arguments from the other side. So that's why I would say that you see such powerful reactions from the other side and the attempts to shut me down. Facebook is an important illustration of that, and what they're doing with me, I believe, is absolutely unacceptable. However, we have to sort of start with the recognition of exactly what Facebook is and other platforms like Facebook and what they represent in our society today. Because too many people will say things like, oh, well, Facebook's a private company and they can do what they want and who cares, right? But people need to understand that Facebook has 2.4 billion users worldwide. They have 19 million users in Canada, which represents something like 75% of the voting population in Canada. Okay, they have, if they decide to turn their attention to manipulating public opinion, they have enormous power, like almost absolute power, to totally transform public debates and discussions. And I would say that is what they are doing with me. So this is not just a trifle, right? This is a serious issue. So they provide a service to the public. Okay, so the service that they provide to the public is they provide a social platform for people to come and discuss social issues and things that they care about, right? And everybody is invited to partake in that service. They also provide an advertising service, which is a part of my complaint as well, that everybody's supposed to be able to access. Now in Canada, people are not allowed to discriminate against people on prohibited grounds. So for instance, Facebook can't say, all right, you're a black person, well, we're not going to let you advertise on Facebook because we don't like black people. Or what, you're a Jewish person, well, we're not going to let you advertise on Facebook because we think the Torah is a load of bunk and we don't want you here. They're not allowed to discriminate on those grounds, right? Okay, so my argument is exactly what they are doing with me. Okay, so they are basically saying to me that my beliefs, my fundamental core beliefs about who I am and how I express in the world and what is true is forbidden, and that I'm not allowed to speak that. So that is why I'm sort of pushing this argument at this time.
A quick point here from someone who opposes you. Morgan Auger says what Jenn Smith writes online and says at events would bring him civil liability if he were to put them on paper under BC's human rights complaints. Morgan Auger says you basically have no case. And Auger has been very critical of you. She refuses to speak to you or communicate with you directly. But she essentially says you discriminate against trans people, in some instances claiming that they have mental illnesses. And with you opposing gender identity to be taught in schools, she says that is a wrong policy, a wrong argument, and she basically says your arguments are dangerous, pose a danger to trans people, transgender people, and transgender youth. What do you say to that?
Okay, so Morgan Auger I would classify as a deliberate and regular deceiver and a manipulator. Morgan puts out these claims without any attempt to back up the claims in terms of providing specific instances of me promoting hatred, and this is pretty much the same thing with Facebook too. But Morgan will make these charges against me, but never provide proof of those charges. Now, saying that, for instance, that transgender people, and I'm going to qualify this and make it very clear that when I say that transgender people have mental illness, I'm not saying all transgender people. I'm saying that many have mental illness, and this is a documented fact, and it's something that we need to consider, particularly with our children. Okay, so the children who are falling for this are at least, like in the neighborhood of 50% of them can be shown to have multiple DSM-listed mental health conditions, and that is an important thing to discuss, and people like Morgan do not want me discussing that. But that isn't, like, for me to bring this up and say we need to consider this. This is not hate speech. This is a legitimate argument. If Morgan and company have a legitimate rebuttal, go right ahead, but neither Morgan nor Facebook should be arbitrarily shutting me down. And that's what Facebook is doing. So I will say something like, for instance, that a man cannot be a woman. A man can, like me, can dress as they want, express as they want, wear makeup, wear skirts. That's all fine and good. Go right ahead. Nobody's saying that I or anybody else can't do that. What we're saying is that you cannot mow down reality and force other people to accept the idea that a man can be a woman.
This is what makes you so controversial, because you have trans men and trans women. They identify as either trans male or trans female, and I have no problems, and many Canadians have no issue with acknowledging or referencing a trans person the way they choose to be identified. If it's a trans woman, I identify her, reference her in the way that she so chooses, and the same with a trans male, and the same with yourself. You identify, you are born biological male, you present female, you dress female, but you identify as a as transgender. But you say, I'm a man who dresses and presents in a female way, but I am transgender. Not transgender male, but transgender. It is, I prefer to identify, and I think many Canadians prefer to identify trans men and trans women the way they self-identify. I have no issue with that. Why would it be an issue for you?
Okay, well, the whole pronoun and language thing is a long discussion. It's a complicated discussion. Basically, I believe that language is being used as a kind of psychological bludgeoning tool to force people to submit to what many people do not believe, okay? So it's kind of like the story in George Orwell's 1984, where O'Brien is holding up 4 fingers, and he says to Winston, how many fingers am I holding up? Winston says 4, and then electric shock, and O'Brien says, no, it's 5. So that's what we're doing here with language too. So we're forcing people to deny physical reality even when they have spiritual beliefs that basically insist that they're not allowed to do that. We're saying, no, you have to recognize or admit to the fact that a man is a woman, and do that using language. But like I say, that's a whole long, complicated debate.
Absolutely, absolutely. It's a long and one that we can't delve into here. But other than that, with your case, filing a human rights complaint against Facebook, it's not a Canadian company. How do you see yourself having any kind of success with this complaint, given that Facebook is not a Canadian company, not a Canadian entity, and Facebook does have the right to decide who is welcomed on its platform and who aren't?
Okay, so Facebook is an international company. They have an office in Vancouver, and that is what is enabling me to file this complaint. So they have a business license in British Columbia, and they are obligated thus to follow laws in British Columbia. They are actually mandated to follow Canadian election laws. And they're also, I would argue, mandated to follow Canadians' human rights laws. Now, I would say that the most fundamental human right that we possess is freedom of speech and freedom of conscience. Without freedom of speech, you cannot even discuss any of these other rights, okay? And they are trampling my freedom of speech by saying that my core beliefs, and these are spiritually informed beliefs. So I believe that whether you are male or female is coded into every cell of your body by a higher power in this universe, and that to deny that is essentially a lie. Okay, so again, back to I can express as I want, but I can't deny my sex. But what Facebook is saying is that you have no right to believe that, okay? And we're not going to allow you to express your deeply held beliefs. Furthermore, as a political actor in British Columbia who is trying to affect social change, they are interfering in the political process in British Columbia by silencing one side of the debate. And that is a dangerous exercise of enormous power that Facebook has, and it has to be fought against, in my opinion.
You have now filed your human rights complaint based on censorship and discrimination. Some, as I mentioned earlier, claim that you are discriminating against transgender people. They call you as someone who is speaking out in a hateful manner towards transgender people. You deny that fully. And certainly with your case now, do you think the Human Rights Commission, when will you find out about it? What is the process from here now that you filed the complaint?
Yeah, well, it'll take 2 weeks for them to basically decide whether or not they're going to allow the case to go forward. Again, so like when you talk about people say that I discriminate. I don't discriminate. I don't prevent anybody from living as they want. I don't say that people shouldn't be able to live as they want. I don't say that people should be silenced for what they believe. It's other people who are saying that about me. So my submission to Facebook will take probably a couple of weeks more before they decide on it. But if they deny me, they're going to have trouble because they have just approved Jessica Yaniv dragging 17 women into the Human Rights Tribunal because they refused to wax his genitals, right? So what? They're going to...
I identify Yaniv as her. I refer to her as her.
Okay. Okay, but that's the issue here. So the issue is that's your right, and I allow you to do that. The question is that I don't believe that. So do I have a right to believe the contrary? This is the issue here. What Facebook is saying and what society is saying is that I don't have a right to believe what I believe. Okay, and I think that is fundamentally wrong. And so when I say that I'm being discriminated against based on my belief and regularly harassed and silenced, that is an important question that needs to be addressed and answered in a meaningful way, as does this question of whether or not can I recognize that a male is a male? Do I have a right to do that? Or if a male says that I must recognize them as a female, is it like acceptable to force me to do that? I say no, and I need to say that this question needs to be addressed.
So within a few weeks, you will find out if the case, if they will move forward with your case. I mean, there was another similar case on Twitter when someone was removed from the Twitter platform. That case didn't go forward.
Maybe.
I don't know if that set some sort of a precedent here, but...
Okay, that's Megan Murphy. Okay, so but Megan
Yes.
Murphy, that's sort of a different argument. That was a lawsuit that went ahead. Okay, this is a different thing. This is a human rights complaint. Okay, I'm saying that my rights are being violated. My right to believe what I want and speak what I want is being violated, and I'm being denied a service. So it's a whole sort of different thing than a lawsuit, right? This is looking at what my rights are and what our rights are.
I thank you so much, Jenn Smith, for speaking with us today and giving us your thoughts on and your reasons for moving forward with your human rights complaint against Facebook, citing discrimination, citing censorship, and we will talk further as this case moves along.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Okay, bye-bye.
And that was Jenn Smith. Jenn Smith is, as I mentioned earlier, viewed as very controversial because Jenn Smith has contrarian viewpoints. Jenn Smith does not believe. Hello?
Hello.
Hi, Jen. Thank you for your time.
Okay, bye.
Take care. Bye.